People of all nations, people of all trends, enjoy this proclamation of freedom and strength. People of all nations, people of all trends, enjoy this celebration of freedom and strength. Idle no more, idle no more, idle no more, idle no more. Ayan. Stop the evictions! Stop the evictions!
Stop the evictions! Stop the evictions! Stop the evictions! Stop the evictions! Stop the evictions! Stop the evictions! Stop the evictions! Stop the evictions!
Stop the evictions!
We found out about the eviction at, I believe it was the end of May. We received a letter from Timber Creek stating that we had something short of 90 days to just pack up our entire lives and kind of transplant ourselves somewhere else.
What we face on a daily basis in Herongate is the total neglect of the state, but beyond that, beyond neglect to the point where it is purposeful internalization of poverty. I'd say that's the biggest one, because this is how you break up a neighborhood. This is how you break up solidarity amongst low-income people, amongst people from, you know, who share cultural identities and who share a struggle. That struggle being one of poverty, being a struggle of navigating social services in this country, the struggle of trying to pay rent, the struggle of not knowing if you're going to be able to stay in your home because the landlord is increasing rent all the time and it's perfectly legal. So it's these legal systems that really crush people, wear them down, and make it very hard to fight back.
They think of crime, they think of immigrants, they think of negligence, and oftentimes too, speaking to people in like surrounding neighborhoods, people oftentimes put the onus on the tenants in that like they're the ones that drove these houses to the ground. It's their fault that this is happening to them, and I think that that's a theme that you see, especially in like Black, poor, and Muslim communities, that oftentimes the onus is put on them and they're criminalized, even though they literally were just living in these homes and they were purposefully neglected. And so whenever I think of Herongate, I definitely think of, yeah, like, I think of like, it's just like this like criminalization of people who literally were just living.
At what point do you feel I've already done enough to these people? For me, my family was fine to sort of make their way and find another home. But what gets me emotional are the stories and the experiences of people that, you know, came to this country. Excuse me. One of my neighbors had only been in Canada for 3 years, and her, I remember the first time my family met her, she was just so overwhelmed just with joy to find someone from the same city as her, from back home, you know, right in that community. And she often, you know, relied on us to help her out with, you know, going to parent-teacher interviews, going to, you know, children's doctor's appointments. And our family made an effort to really do whatever we could for her to make sure that she was comfortable. This eviction notice really put her a very vulnerable space where she felt as though, you know, she went from being displaced to, again, you know, finding a home and then being forced out again. So when she would come over to our house and have conversations about the flashbacks she was having from Kenya, it deeply affected me, and I could just see the fear in her eyes of not being able to find a home because, I mean, let's be real, who's going to rent out their private home to a new immigrant?
Timber Creek is a slumlord. And so one of their big executive guys from Toronto, he was talking to me and he said, oh yeah, but we're much better than the previous landlord. And you know, they talk to you like you're an infant. And they said, we're much, much better than the previous landlord. We've invested $40 million in the properties. And you know, where does that $40 million go? It goes into the glass balconies. That doesn't affect anybody. All it affects is the view from the outside. So when they're going to be renting out their new luxury apartments, it's to help those people, to help to rent out those new apartments because they're going to be seeing the glass balconies. And it is, you know, they built a community garden, like bullshit like that they spent their $40 million on. Like nobody knows where that money went. It clearly didn't go into the apartments and the units that have been neglected.
Capitalism manifests itself is through things like gentrification. You'll see that communities that are so vibrant and lively are oftentimes targeted because, you know, for one reason or the other, these real estate companies feel like, hey, I feel like these people have lived here for long enough, it's time for us to develop something new and transplant this community with people from, you know, suburban communities that have more money.
I definitely think that it's something, it was something done knowing that these people are people who are predominantly first-generation immigrants, so assume that they don't really know their rights, they don't speak the English language, they're not intelligent, and so they're not going to know how to organize or why to organize. And so I definitely think that that's something that Timber Creek had in mind when doing this. And so I think that if it was definitely a predominantly white neighborhood, that would not be the case, and we wouldn't be seeing this happen at all.
Truly, what happens to, or the, you know, the events that aren't documented by the news or the news doesn't take interest in, that are specific to like minority groups and minority communities. I feel like at times, you know, I will go far, and I know this might sound like a far stretch, but I do feel like at times, you know, the city of Ottawa did not take any interest in really backing our community up and really truly understanding that what is happening in Herongate or has happened to Herongate is really a human rights violation.
Ottawa is sort of a city that is sort of disconnected because it revolves more around like cars and developers and box stores. Like anytime something is built, it's you know, the same thing, box store after box store. It's just replicated along these huge streets. And like just geographically, again, if you look at it from a really just purely geographical perspective, Ottawa is massive. People are naturally like very, very far apart from each other, so it's hard to have these like personal connections, these human connections with people. But Herongate, because of its just density, and then the nature that it's evolved, and because a lot of people come from similar backgrounds, and at least there's a common struggle. So there's, again, the racial point of view, where there's a lot of people who come from similar backgrounds and have that that network and that solidarity, that cultural alliance, and then there's also the shared struggle of poverty.
Like you walk by one area and you smell Nepali food, you walk by another area, you smell Somali food, you walk by another area, you smell Arabic food, like you hear a multitude of languages, like just walking in the neighborhood. And so I think it's just a culturally and like ethnically diverse area. And there's no area like it, and so I definitely think that it's unique in that sense, and that it's so interconnected and actually is what a community is supposed to be. Like neighbors depending on their neighbors for things like food, babysitting, transportation, and so I think that's something that gets lost, is that like this is an extremely unique neighborhood and that people are extremely interdependent and interconnected. So I think that's what makes the neighborhood definitely unique.
Very close-knit. We could just go over to the next person's house to get, you know, a bit of sugar, a glass of milk. We really treated each other like family there. And, you know, that specific area, we always knew that no matter what, we had a group of people that were behind us to support us in whatever it is that we needed. So that's really what was unique about Herongate.
My community has shaped me tremendously. Like the career that I want to go into, I want to be a lawyer and applying to law school right now. And that's something that I spoke to like really heavily in my personal statement, is that the reason why I want to go into law is not because of money or because of power or whatever. It's because I want to literally help my community. My community has literally made me who I am today.
My community would be a form of self-preservation. You know, a large part of our identities are really rooted in our communities because, hey, this is where we come from. So when I think of self-preservation, I definitely think about my community.